Hello and welcome to Drive and Double Feature Podcast. I'm Nathan.
I'm Ryan.
And this is the podcast where we talk about 2 movies a week every Tuesday and Thursday. But before we get into today's movie, we have a Patreon over at patreon.com/driveindoublefeaturepodcast. You can actually support us just for $5 a month. You could help us get into streaming services and stuff like that. And also you get fun bonus episodes exclusively on there where we do like fun BuzzFeed quizzes and review kind of modern movies. But getting into today's episode, we are talking about Tenebrae from 1982, directed by Dario Argento. Our first time talking about an Argento movie. He's kind of like, we've talked about Giallo here before, which if you don't know, it's like Italian horror murder mystery. Argento is kind of considered like the best of that bunch of people. This is the first one here. So I don't know. I'm excited to talk about Tenebrae.
It's almost surprising that we haven't gotten to him yet.
I know. I'm surprised too. And so the reason I picked this one, Ryan, I have seen this movie before. I watched it a few years ago, and I happen to love this movie. I think Tenebrae rocks. There's something about it that I really enjoy. So now that pressure's put onto you, how did you feel about it, Ryan?
This movie sucked.
Yeah. That's what I expected.
No, it was great. I really did like it a lot. Just so surprising how some of the cinematography in this movie, like that's just, I don't have that lens where I notice that stuff a lot of times but this one, like there's like this one shot that tracks through an entire home, and it's just like one of the craziest shots I've seen for a movie.
Yeah, it's mind-blowing, that whole sequence. Like I think that's Argento is, because I think about Suspiria, right, where his movies look so radically cool and do such like cool things that you do notice it. You know, it does pop out at you because he's trying a lot of different stuff. But another thing that I really love about this movie, and I just got to talk about now, the music. It's Goblin, which is Argento's like normal band that he would go to, and I think the theme to this movie is great, and the movie just pounds it into you throughout the entire movie.
Yeah, they also did Suspiria.
Yes, they did. Yeah. And they just, I don't know, really good synth heavy stuff. But unlike Suspiria, this is more of a murder mystery slasher movie than anything supernatural. It's kind of like back to basics. That's what he was planning on doing. It was like, I'm going to just make a normal murder mystery type Giallo movie.
It has a lot of the same tropes from all the other ones. Black gloved killer, uses a razor blade.
Yep.
Lots of blue and red lighting everywhere. It checks all the boxes.
Yes, it does. It checks all the boxes. And I mean, of course, just like another one that we covered, New York Ripper, except that one has a duck voice. This man speaks, whoever talks on the phone and is the killer has to speak in the lowest voice possible, or you can't understand what they're saying when they're speaking. And dubbed, of course. You can't get away from a dub.
Yeah, why would you have their natural voices?
Yeah, that's so weird. Why not call them in so they try their hardest to match with the lips?
Can you imagine if you watched a like Tom Hanks movie or something like that, and it was a completely different voice coming out of his mouth the entire movie?
That would be so weird, right? Like I couldn't imagine. Like, luckily, the only actor I really know from this movie, like John Saxon, and pretty sure he does his own voice here. So at least that's the same.
And he's got a snazzy hat.
Yes, he does. One of the best parts of this movie. Like, he loves that hat, and he talks about it. This movie is about an author who writes a bunch of murder mystery novels, and somebody becomes obsessed with it and starts killing people. So you have that plot, but then you have the writer kind of going through his motions, and that's where John Saxon comes in, who's his agent. and he has that snazzy hat, and they talk about it. And he's like, yeah, I got this in Italy, and it doesn't look nice. And he asks, like, how does it stay on your head? And he does like a motion where he whips his head back and forth, and he's like, see, doesn't leave my head.
I wanted more moments like that. Like,
I forgot, because it's been a few years since I watched this. I forgot this movie has like some silly moments like that in it. It's like not afraid to be a little goofy, which I can appreciate that from a horror movie. When it gets serious, it gets pretty serious and hardcore.
well, I wanted to talk about the very, very beginning of this movie.
Mm-hmm.
After they do like the little credit intro,
Mm-hmm.
the author, he's going to the airport, but he's biking to the airport. I just was like, that's so odd. And
Mm-hmm.
then he has, because you figure if you're going to be biking to the airport, he didn't have any luggage, but then like his car was also following him. I guess like his chauffeur with the luggage.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's, I don't. It just seems very inefficient. And then after he gets off, I was thinking, like, man, I'd be like pouring with sweat and everything. And then the last thing I'd want to do is get on an airplane.
Yeah, imagine the person that had to sit next to him on the flight. Like, I feel bad for that person.
Well, then he had to change his clothes like in the airport, and he was. Did you see he had like his clothes hanging everywhere in the airport, like it was like a hotel bathroom or something.
Yeah, is this like a normal thing? Like, is this a thing people do? Like, because you see that sometimes in movies, like people like shaving in the airport bathroom, and like, well, mainly the terminal, but that man was living in the airport. This guy is not living in the airport.
I think I've seen a guy shave once in my entire life in the airport.
Really? I don't think I've ever seen it. I haven't flown that much, but a weird thing to do in front of a bunch of people in an airport bathroom where you have your luggage next to you after you bike there, of course, because I bike to the airport. That's just the way you should do it. But yeah, I this airport sequence is funny because he does get a call. I was just like, it takes you such like back to a time and place whenever someone on the airport intercom has to tell you that you're getting a call at the main front desk while you're leaving.
If you wanted to get in touch with somebody, you would have to call the airport to ask them to put you on the phone.
Yeah. And then it's like, it's not even a good conversation because the whole time he's talking to this woman on the phone, he's like, I'm going to hang up. If you keep doing this, I'm going to hang up on you. Stop. Be quiet.
And then those people are just like staring at him like,
yeah.
Can we have our phone back?
Wait a second. Aren't you famous writer Peter Neal? Which, you know, that everybody knows Peter Neal, right?
I was about to say for an author, it's, there's very few authors I could probably put a face to a name.
Yeah.
So he must be like just Stephen King levels. So
yeah, exactly. Like there's like just a few, like in Stephen King being like the biggest one. So I guess he must be, but it sounded like listening to the dialogue that this is only like his third book or so is what it seemed like. Cause they only talked about two other ones.
No, I was just gonna what a impact this man must have had for 3 books to just be like instant mega superstar.
I know. And like it's weird because they sound like the trashiest novels because they're about like murdering and like it's about a killer and like it sounds like a sexist dude, and he gets ambushed because he gets right off the airplane and he goes straight to an interview, and this woman shows up and is like, how do you feel? Like, you know, you treat women like garbage in this book. Like, what's your deal? Like, what's your problem?
Well, not only that, when he gets off the plane, this woman greets him like so happily, and then that same woman then starts grilling him with questions, and then after he's like, what the hell? And she's like, oh, don't take it personally, it's just my job. And
it's just
and then she's like, oh, my mother would love it if you'd call her again.
Yeah, they like know each other on a personal level. It's so weird.
But has no problem raking him over the coals and being like, why are you such a misogynist pig?
Yeah. And I take this all and like reading into it, this is kind of like Dario Argento's meta thing. It's like he is he is this character Peter Neal, and it's him going over the criticism that his movies are sexist and kind of like the everything that goes into that. And I think that's really interesting that he got to this point in his career where he can make a meta movie about himself.
Yeah, well, it's pretty clear right away that that's what it's doing, because this movie, they said, oh, well, you just feature a lot of women getting horribly murdered, and that's what Dario Argento has a lot of imagery like that in his old movies, and then in this one proceeds to do the same thing. So it's like showing how they kind of align, and they use a lot of they mention religion a lot too in this movie, which Argento has done in the past too. So it's just all the calling cards of Dario Argento's past.
Yeah, and it all comes to play here. In one of the craziest moments in this movie is the shoplifter woman from the very beginning of the movie who is stealing Peter Neal's new book, Tenebrae, and they catch her. And it's just horribly dubbed. I think this part is so silly, but I do love the camera of the person watching her shoplift, like kind of moving, but come to find out it's just like the store owner.
Yeah, I like it. And then she gets captured by the police, and she's like, oh, come on. Like, she's basically like, oh, come on. Can't you let me out of this? He's like, maybe I can make it up to you. He's like, you're not gay, are you? And
yeah, that was like, oh, you're not going to take a bribe? Then you're gay.
Yeah, you're not going to sleep with me to get me out of jail. You must be gay.
Yeah, that sounds like a Giallo line, which we'll get into it later. But she's the first victim in the movie, and her death is just a slice on the neck, but she gets pages of the book Tenebrae shoved down her throat when she dies. So that's how it gets connected to our author here. And we have a lead detective that works with him. And I don't know, Peter Neal in this movie, there's something I like about this character, because it's almost like he's playing it nonchalant. He does care, and he almost becomes his own detective. But whenever he hears anything about a killer, he just brushes it off, and he's just like, "Oh, it's kind of silly, kind of deal."
Well, yeah, because when he first arrives to Rome, because the woman that was killed, she was obviously a fan of Peter Neal, and the police are already suspecting him, which. That part I was like, okay, well, he just got off the plane, so I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyway, the killer does call him, and he almost gets like kind of like excited when the killer calls him. It's like, hey, what, about that woman that you killed? And he's like, who told you about that?
Yeah, who's there? Well, he's like on the ball like a cop. Like as soon as he picks it up, he knows it's the killer, and he's like snapping. He's like, hey, get over here. We got to start recording this. Track this line. Like he knows. He's like, I want to talk to you. Can we meet sometime? Just kind of funny. One of the better lines in this movie is the detective's like, oh, it's just like your book, and he's like, well, if somebody shot somebody with a gun, you wouldn't call Smith and Wesson first to ask them about the killing. I was like, okay, that's kind of funny.
I thought that too, because when he was questioning him, I'm like, because I like to think of points to say during the podcast, like analogies like that, and I was thinking like, oh, that's like if you like did that sort of thing. I was thinking something along, and he said it. I'm like, oh, okay, he said it for me.
Wow, we should have him on the podcast.
I know, he'd probably be more entertaining.
I'm not saying that. Where is this guy? Anthony Fran? Oh,
he's dead.
Rest in peace.
But speaking about that guy, though, apparently Dario Argento did not like working.
Really? I didn't know that.
He said he was one of the most difficult actors that he's worked with.
Wow. I mean, like looking at his career, he's been in a lot of movies, a lot of classics. It looks like he won a Golden Globe for Career from 1959. I don't know that movie. He is in A Face in a Crowd.
And he's Oscar nominee too.
Yeah, so he has a long history. And I guess maybe you get to this point, you got to travel to Italy to make your movies. You're filming in Rome. Maybe you're just a little miffed a little.
Well, that kind of happens a lot with these actors. They either go to Italy because they're like in the twilight of their career, and that's like the only people that are willing to pay money to, or they're a young up and coming actor that hasn't gotten a lot of opportunities, and they end up making their name, sort of like Clint Eastwood did. And then,
exactly.
But it reminds me of a lot of, my favorite director, Quentin Tarantino's movie, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where the actor went and worked in Italy for a time period.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the best parts of that movie, where it describes the movies he was in and all that, because it's like it really shows like that time and place in history, like kind of what actors like him would have done. Also, this actor was married to Shelley Winters for 3 years, so interesting. Hopefully it's not like he ran all the way and she met him in a swimming pool or something.
Yeah, hopefully it wasn't like that meeting at all.
Let's hope not. But so this movie really plays into the murder mystery angle of this. It's a slasher movie. There's a bunch of killings, but it's more about finding the killer than I would have expected the first time around to watching this movie.
I will say, so one thing I will point out about this movie is I did guess the killer kind of.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
I could almost right away, because they make a point that they make a point and say like, oh, there was this weird guy just like hanging out in the corner, and then they're like, oh, that's Cristiano. Like, we're going to be interviewing him later, don't worry. And then of course he's like the most antagonistic interview that he's had, so I'm like, oh, okay. And then that's spoilers, by the way.
A spoiler for a 40-year-old movie, I think we'll be okay. But yeah, no, so yeah, that he ends up being the killer. But what I like about this movie is he ends up only being the killer for maybe 75% of the murders.
Well, what I was going to say is this movie did throw like a big curveball at me afterwards, because I was kind of like, oh, okay, it's so-and-so. The part I won't reveal is afterwards, is because this movie, once you kind of think of what was going on, it's something else was kind of playing out behind the scenes.
Exactly. And that's what I think, like that. Like I was in the same boat. You can tell that guy was going to be the killer, but I do like what they threw at you afterwards.
Yeah, that's not the end of the movie. There's definitely a lot more happening afterwards. So I didn't reveal the big ending.
But this killer, one of the best sequences in this movie, it's a sequence I love, is the lesbian couple.
What a scene.
Yeah, what a scene. Their intro is really weird, because she's a reporter and her girlfriend sleeps with a man for like a story, I guess is what it is. Right? Yeah.
I mean, well,
and she's like jealous of her.
Well, yeah, because her girlfriend is kind of like the steamy, like sultry one, and then the girl who was the one grilling Peter Neal at the beginning of the movie, that's her lesbian lover, and she's more of like the nerdy, bookish type, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And they have an argument in their house, and it's such an argument. Like one of the girls is just naked, like the whole
she's
time.
Just naked.
And by the way, this movie does have an amount of sleaze to it. Like there's definitely plenty of boobs and all that. And then but she has like, oh no, I'm going to throw up.
Yeah. I love that. And like it's not like she's fully nude for whatever reason. She just has one boob out, and it's out for like, well, she's covered in a towel otherwise, but it's just out the whole scene. And this is a long scene, by the way. She never is like, I'm going to cover up, I'm a little cold, or something like that.
Well, yeah, she just got out of the shower. She's still wet and everything. And she's just like, oh yeah, I'm just going to have this towel loosely hanging around my body.
Yeah, it's silly. But the thing that sticks out about this scene is after this, it's like a whole tracking shot, one shot sequence of the one woman downstairs, and then from outside the house the camera moves through the windows. You see through the windows over the roof. Like there's a long period where you just look at the roof, and then you go to another set of windows, and like you just look. It's so cool. Like I never would have thought about doing anything like that. I don't know how I know it's a crane shot, but it just seems like a lot.
Completely pointless in terms of storytelling.
Yeah, it doesn't really do anything.
But it's a great shot.
Yes, it is. And the woman upstairs, I love it. She's blasting music, and the woman downstairs is upset, and she's blasting just the Tenebrae theme and music from the movie. She's like, "Turn that down!" Just listening to the movie's music.
She had like a beer collection too on like her top shelf.
I didn't notice that.
It's like she had like all these beer cans like on the top of a bookcase type of thing. And so I was wondering what that was all about.
I don't know.
They probably just filmed it in somebody's house, and that's just what was in their room or something.
Yeah, probably. And I mean, there's no character development with these two. They do die, they do get killed. And one of the coolest shots in the movie is, with dumb setup, of course, is the girl downstairs. She's just like, she's scared. She thinks there's a killer there, and she's like, I need to change my shirt real fast. So she takes a shirt and she puts it on, and for like a solid 10 seconds, she can't get it over her neck. She's struggling. So the killer takes advantage and slices the shirt, and you see her face through the shirt, and then you see another slash and blood appears. I think that's just a cool looking shot.
It's so good they used it as the poster.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I don't think this shot specifically, but I've read around a lot of knocking off from Brian De Palma and a few other movies later on. We'll get into it, which I find really interesting.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Specifically one shot in the end where a guy is standing there and gets killed, and the killer's behind him. That is used in Brian De Palma's Raising Cain, I guess, which is a movie we'll get to at some point. I own that on Laserdisc, actually.
Oh, exciting.
Yeah. But no, this movie is graphic. I do think it's a good amount of blood. We've seen more on the show, but for some reason, this movie is like banned in a lot of countries. This is part of the video nasties in the United Kingdom. It was a movie that you could not rent forever. And this movie's still banned in Germany. Like, it's still a movie you cannot get in Germany, which is super interesting.
Well, you're right, though. There is a good amount of blood, but it's like, I feel like we've seen worse, even by those timeline standards of that time period.
I agree. Even in the 80s, I feel like I've seen worse. But I mean, maybe it's one part specifically at the end. To jump ahead a little bit, there's a whole really great ending sequence, and a woman gets her arm chopped off with an axe, like through the window, and she's just holding her arm, and blood is just spraying all over to the walls. That's the one part where I was like, wow, that's really graphic. Yeah.
Can I tell you my favorite scene from the movie?
Yes. What's that?
Okay, so Peter Neal's character is staying at like a house type of thing, or like a hotel, bed and breakfast, something like that. Anyway, the owner of the hotel has a daughter.
Yes.
And one night she's out walking, and there's this Doberman, this dog that wants to get after her. This is the most determined dog on the planet.
I know. I have to ask the question, who let the dog out? Because
no.
He's behind the fence and he leaps and he can't reach over the fence. And if you were a normal person, you would walk away. But for some reason, she gets a stick, starts banging the fence, and then next shot, she's walking down the road and the Doberman's out. The Doberman's there.
I know. I don't think anyone let the dog out.
I know.
Okay.
I think he jumped over, but.
Oh, were you making a joke?
I was making a joke.
Oh.
But I mean, still, it's like this dog is determined to kill this girl.
This girl is running for what feels like forever, and this dog is just full on sprinting. This girl has jumped over, I don't know how many different fences. There's this one fence that's probably like 10 to 12 feet, would you say?
Yeah.
And this dog, and they don't cut away from this. This dog like throws itself onto the fence and climbs the fence and jumps.
Who is this Doberman actor? He's like, what, the Chuck Norris of dog actors?
I'm surprised he didn't get like exported to America.
Yeah, I know, right? wild. But no, but what I find funniest about this scene is the dog chases her exactly to the killer's home. Like, what is the logic here? Like, I mean, I know stranger things have happened, but that is so like a luck base that she ends up right in the killer's place.
Yeah, and she starts finding evidence about the killer and everything, and then but the killer does eventually catch up to her and murders her with an axe. And just the POV from the killer from the axe, that's a great shot too.
No, I agree. I guess, like, to put it in the terms that, like, I really love this movie because its style is so cool. Like, it looks great. It's always really cool to look at. And what I really love about Giallos, which we've talked about a lot in here, is that they're not afraid to be stylish. They're not afraid to really just like put their look out there. And like, I know there's certain people that really go style over substance, and that's a bad thing, but I necessarily never really feel that way. I mean, there is a point where it gets bad, but I think the style is perfectly great to be a part of.
Well, we've said it before. I'll be the first to say it for this movie. There's not like any standout acting performances or anything like that, and I wouldn't even say there was anything like great by any means. But it's just these movies have such a mood and atmosphere to them. It's just you watch it and you just kind of get immersed into the whole genre of it, just being like this, a lot of these moody lights and dark backgrounds. I mean, there's a scene where a character gets stabbed in broad daylight and just like bleeding out everywhere.
And that felt like a Hitchcock moment, actually, to me, like a person just getting killed right in the middle of like a city square almost. Yeah.
And then there's another axe kill where somebody gets hit like square, like right in the middle of the head, and it's so like the sound it makes is so brutal.
Yeah, it's gross. I think getting to like the end of the movie, like I said, with the arm part, I think that's when it really gets like gross and there's blood everywhere. There's a silly bit of foreshadowing when they show the sculpture for a second and it like makes the ding, and that ends up killing someone towards the end of the movie. Which
it's such a silly way somebody dies. But
I know
it's almost perfect too.
It works. No, this sculpture kill is really cool. I don't know. It's funny, and the movie ends on that, and of course with a woman screaming as loud as she can. And this woman, she was in shock, right?
Was she?
God.
Was she the mom?
I think so. Yes. Yeah. So yeah, she was the mom, Daria Nicolodi. And you know what? She moved up in her career. This is much better than Shock.
I like this movie a lot better than Shock.
Yes. But I'm trying to think of anything else. No, I just think overall, I mean, there's some silly moments, like a guy getting choked out in the car after he goes to the house and he remembers seeing something. So like, he saw someone die and then he walks away and then he comes back down. She's like, oh yeah, when I saw that person get murdered, I remember they said they were the killer.
Oh yeah, I remember seeing the actual killer now. Just forgot that little detail.
Yeah, probably. You know, if you saw someone get murdered, you'd probably remember a lot of it. It's such a horrible thing to see.
You'd probably be begging to forget it.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I think that's about it from me. I think this movie is really neat. I think it's a fun movie. If you really like horror movies, I think this belongs in like a good rotation of classic horror.
Yeah, it's definitely up there in terms of giallo movies that I've seen in the past. And I haven't seen all of Dario Argento's work, but honestly, like as much as I like Suspiria, I mean, this one is definitely one that stands out. I keep thinking about that a lot more. I would have to watch Suspiria again.
Yeah,
I need to determine what my actual feelings are.
Yeah, I need to too, because Suspiria was my first of his movies to watch, and I feel like I watched it a long time ago. but I know my tastes personally. I guess I prefer more of slasher horror over supernatural horror. But Suspiria's in its own league with the colors in that movie and everything. So maybe we could do that at one point. Argento month. Who knows?
Yeah. Who knows? Hey.
But yeah, you have anything else?
No, I think that's it. I definitely a huge recommend.
Yeah, it's a recommendation for me too. But Ryan, what are we going to be covering on Thursday?
Well, next time, Nathan, this one, let's do an easy movie.
I've heard there's certain types of women that are easy. But I forget who I'm thinking of.
Let me see. Mars, Mercury, Earth girls are easy.
I do agree. Isn't that the name of a hit movie?
Well, maybe not a hit, but anyway, we're going to be talking about the movie Earth Girls Are Easy, and it is available for free on Tubi, so you can watch that along with us.
Yeah. And if you want to recommend us something, you can email us over at driveindoublefeaturepodcast@gmail.com. You can also talk to us about anything. We'd love to hear from you. Be sure to check us out over on Twitter at DIDF pod. But until next time.